Can they not hear me? Is that part of the problem? Can the Zoom people in the Zoom hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So Neil, you may begin your testimony.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Glad to see you. Sorry, you probably can't see me. We'll figure that out. I am here, I swear.
Okay, well, my name is Neil Seldman. I work with Zero Waste USA, and I have never been more optimistic about the chances and opportunities for the city to move forward towards zero waste and all the benefits that it can provide for the city, including reducing pollution, reducing costs, increasing jobs, particularly jobs for the hard to employ people who reside in the city. I base this optimism on the fact that the DC transfer stations have to be rebuilt in the immediate future, and that the city is moving forward with planning, and there apparently are open channels of communications with the community to have input into the planning and development of the facilities at Fort Totten and Benning Road. The money for the rebuilding of Benning Road has already been allocated $100 million. And I presume that over the next few years, a similar amount would be available for rebuilding Fort Totten. These transfer stations can be built on the model of zero waste transfer stations, which are being built across the country. The specific things that they can accommodate are, for example, a wash system that will allow companies and city agencies to rewash a long-lasting tableware made out of stainless steel or durable plastic to replace the one-way plastic tableware that creates so much pollution. Secondly, the facilities can have a sort area for repairable and reusable products. This is essential for creating excellent, good jobs that reskill hard to employ people in the city. I want to congratulate the DPW for moving forward on composting, for moving forward on involving public housing units in the recycling and composting program. The importance of the facilities, the transfer facilities as an anchor for this development is crucial. I have been a student of the city's solid waste management system for 50 years. The facilities at Fort Totten and Benning Road over those years have been allowed to dilapidate, and Benning Road is unfunctional, dysfunctional, and Fort Totten is crippled. The investment by the city can be complemented by federal grants for programming. Um, the other thing that can happen is that if the transfer stations are designed properly, the city can revert to dual stream recycling, which it had under the Barry administration, and it was allowed to lapse, and the city started contracting for single stream. This has cost the city about $500,000 a year in transportation and about $500,000 a year of excess processing costs, because dual stream processing costs 1/3 that of single stream processing. I think the DPW Zero Waste Plan helped bring the city together through the outreach of research with community groups, and individuals throughout the planning period. And I think the city has the blueprint for moving forward. We need decision-making at the top of the city, the mayor's people, to realize that the transfer station rebuild is an opportunity to reset the entire solid waste management system in the city and present a zero waste system that will serve the city for generations to come. It will, as I said, reduce costs, provide employment for those who need it, with good jobs that low-income families can get into the economic mainstream. I want to thank the City Council for holding these hearings. I think the dialogue at this time is essential for learning the best practices that are being implemented all across the city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. Really appreciate your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Susan Shore with the Sierra Club.
Good morning, Councilmember Nadeau, and thank you for this opportunity to testify at this public roundtable on the Zero Waste DC Plan and Recycling Contract. My name is Susan Shore. I'm the chair of the Sierra Club DC Chapter Zero Waste Committee. The DC chapter has more than 2,000 dues-paying members in the district and many thousands of supporters. As we all know, recycling and composting fall below rethink, redesign, reduce, and reuse on the zero waste hierarchy. And we should ensure the recycling we do is impactful and cost-effective. We need to fix the mayor's list of recyclables and then pivot our focus on more impactful zero waste programs than plastic recycling. Plastic recycling is a growing concern, as we can see that in the district recycling contract and the mayor's list of recyclables, which appears to be incorporated into our recycling contract. As explained in my written testimony, plastic producers are under fire for deceiving the public and municipalities about how much plastic actually gets recycled and what plastic can even be recycled. Sierra Club has joined 3 other environmental organizations and the state of California in a lawsuit against ExxonMobil about the concern that plastic producers oversold plastic recycling capabilities. My written testimony cites 3 sources which call into question the recyclability of plastic items and resins on the mayor's list of recyclables. The lawsuit cites a report that states only PET and HDPE resins can be recycled, yet the mayor's list includes LDPE, polypropylene, and polystyrene. My testimony includes another report which identifies squeeze bottles, yogurt cups, party cups, Tupperwares, and clamshells, such as those used for bakery products and fruit, as being non-recyclable. It also cites a news article reporting an interview with Republic Waste Services sustainability ambassador that says black plastic is not recyclable. These sources seem to suggest that the mayor's list of recyclables is more in line with the plastic industry's questionable claims about recyclability and less in line with more recent information about plastic recycling. Conducting an analysis of what really can be recycled as more information comes to light should be reason enough to update the mayor's list of recyclables, but in addition, not doing so puts the district at risk for losing money. These concerns should be addressed as DPW works to update the request for proposal, RFP, for the district recycling contract. If the district recycling contract is unable to recycle all the plastic products listed in the mayor's list, DPW risks paying its recycling program contractor to process these materials, which it will likely sort as residue and then send to a landfill or incinerator. So why should the district be paying to process these materials that aren't even recyclable? How much money are we paying for unneeded recycling processing? Once transportation costs are included in the new RFP, we risk paying to transport them as well. We understand that the new RFP DPW is developing will require the recycling program contractor to report to the district on where recycling materials go, how much they are sold for, how much it costs to get rid of them, and how they are used. And we urge this committee to work with DPW to ensure that either an updated mayor's list of recyclables is used in the recycling contract award process currently underway, or that the contract be made flexible enough to allow updating the list of recyclable items as informed by the contractor's reporting on end market disposition. My written testimony also urges DPW to analyze how the recycling contract will calculate the monthly price index and whether the formula included in the Republic bid under the previous RFP is not overly disadvantageous to the district. If the formula can be reworked, it will save the district money. I wanted to note some of the benefits of passing a strong, equitable bottle bill, which will reduce the number of glass bottles processed through the recycling contract, promising to save the district hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. And because glass is one of only 2 negative NPI calculations, reducing the amount of glass processed through the recycling program will save additional money. These savings could be used to fund zero waste programs higher up in the zero waste hierarchy, like rethinking, reducing, and reusing. A strong, equitable bottle bill will bring other benefits. Recycling rates for beverage containers will skyrocket from its current rate of less than 24% upward to 85%. Instead of more than 75% of beverage containers being wasted, meaning buried in landfill, burned in an incinerator, or dumped in neighborhoods, the number of wasted beverage containers will plummet to about 15% sold annually. In other words, our waste diversion rates will increase. Let's fix the recycling contract and focus on more impactful zero waste measures, such as expanded compost collection, a save as you throw pilot, ensuring that the planned Benning Road Zero Waste Campus includes features that Neil Seldman mentioned, such as a shared wash facility for reusable foodware and other items, as well as the promotion of construction material reuse and recycling. Many of the zero waste DC plan's short-term actions are for new policies. And I'm curious, what is the plan for developing these new policies? There's one single-use plastic phase-out policies by 2025 in Action 11. Who is responsible for developing those policies? Is it DPW? Is it council members? Is there an expectation that environmental stakeholders would be developing these? We urge this committee to ensure that zero waste policy development plan is included in the performance oversight hearings. We've advocated for reusable foodware policies in the past, starting with reusable cups in sports stadiums and music venues in line with Action 8, which will prevent waste from occurring, and waste prevention is better than waste diversion. So we've seen that the new zero waste measures like curbside compost collection program have yielded modest but meaningful results. Let's build on this momentum to make the district a leader in zero waste. Thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, for convening this roundtable and for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Susan, for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Mikey Wall, Esquire Energy Justice Network.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Mike, hang on, your audio went out. It doesn't look like you're muted, though.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yep.
Okay, I'm sorry on my audio problems. So thank you, Councilmember Nadeau, and any other committee members who may be watching for having me this morning. My name is Mike Ewall with the Energy Justice Network. The Zero Waste DC plan says on page 6 that it follows the principles of the zero waste hierarchy, which states that incineration is unacceptable in a zero waste system. However, the plan does not otherwise touch the matter of what to do for waste disposal because the zero waste consultants were barred from discussing it by DPW staff. DC has long been sending its trash to an incinerator in Norton, Virginia, in Fairfax County. That incinerator is now the largest in the nation in terms of the amount they actually burn. They are also situated in a community that's one of the most diverse in the country. There's a cluster of facilities next to them, right next to homes, 3 landfills and 2 incinerators, and it's a salient case of environmental racism. In 2017, in February, there was a massive fire that shut the plant down for 11 months until the end of the year. They had 3 stories of trash burning uncontrolled for 2 weeks straight. The community was lied to about the impacts of this, though. They were told by the media that was a recycling plant on fire and that there's no need, by state officials even, and county officials, there's no need to worry about health impacts because it's just normal household trash burning, even though in fact they also burn industrial waste. And even when just normal household trash is burning, it requires 4 air pollution control devices, after which they still release more air pollution than a coal power plant. 2 days into that massive fire, I was going door to door there with a filter mask on, and it was heartbreaking talking to residents, including one who had a 6-year-old daughter trapped at home, unable to be brought anywhere during the time that her mother is away at work. Her daughter suffering from asthma and unable to handle that smoke at the time. Now, how do we get here? First, 12 years ago, when I started working on these issues in the district, there were 6 DPW directors since then that I've experienced. And Bill Howland was the one in charge at the time. He used to work for Fairfax County, and he touted their incinerators so great that DC should have one as well, and tried to build one in Benning Road, which people had to fight, and I helped make sure that was stopped. And there's another case of environmental racism where there used to be an incinerator that closed in 1994. But since then, DPW has been in the mindset that incineration is preferable over landfilling, which is a misguided belief contrary to evidence. Even though we've had 5 newer DPW directors, we're still under the influence of the biases from Howland's DPW. The contract we're in to burn trash at Covanta Fairfax, now named ReWorld, started in 2015, and the RFP for it was rigged by then DPW staffer Hallie Clem to only allow for one facility to bid and get the contract. She wrote it so that only existing trash incinerators were eligible to bid, and they had to be within 50 miles of DC's 2 transfer stations, meaning there are only 4 possible facilities: Covanta Fairfax, Covanta Alexandria Arlington, Montgomery County's incinerator, also run by Covanta, and Wheelbrader Baltimore. Only one of those sits in a white community, and that's in Montgomery County, where DPW staff knew well that they only take waste from within their county. In other words, the RFP violated the Civil Rights Act by limiting the options, so only incinerators in communities of color could qualify and be the communities where they're the first ones to breathe DC's trash. As it turns out, there wasn't enough space in the Alexandria or Baltimore incinerator, so it was really designed for the one bidder that bid, and that was Covanta Fairfax, to get a $36 million contract, which is worth more at this point due to the extensions. This wasn't even fiscally sound. Twice, then DPW Director Bill Howland admitted on the record before City Council in one case that landfilling was cheaper, but that he had DC pay more to use incinerators. He testified before City Council in 2012, stating, and I quote, "There were 9 vendors in 2004 that bid and 5 vendors that bid in 2009. All 14 bids, it was cheaper to take it to landfill, which typically was as far away as Richmond, than it was to take it to Fairfax County," unquote. In 2017, I spoke with plant managers at 4 southeastern Virginia landfills which the private sector uses to take most of the rest of DC's trash. And I was told by all of them that if they were given the same 6 to 11-year term contract that Covanta now has, that they could beat Covanta's price, even though the hauling distance is greater. In 2018, before City Council, then Councilmember Che asked 2 things of DPW, and Chris Shorter committed to this at the time, to get the price of landfills and to do a comparison of incineration versus landfilling. That promise was broken, and those studies were not done under Shorter. Later, under Christine Davis's directorship, Che had to push again on those same 2 promises, and one of them was done, but not the other. In 2017, we actually had already done the incineration versus landfilling study. We had hired a PhD economist who has the most comprehensive life cycle assessment tool for solid waste systems, and found that using the incinerator and the ash dump behind it, the landfill that the Fairfax County has, is far more harmful to climate, health, and environment than using landfills directly. Similar, more recent studies in Montgomery County and Delaware County, Pennsylvania, also found that incineration is about 2 to 3 times as harmful as going straight to a landfill. And EPA even admitted in their hierarchy, which says incineration is better, that they have 0 citations to back up placing incineration above landfilling. And there's now a disclaimer on their hierarchy because we've called them out on this, and they're working on revisiting that. However, DPW put out a biased pro-incinerator scope of work, hired a biased company, CDM Smith, to use a biased model that EPA is working to revise to compare incineration to landfilling, and came back with results that are frankly just embarrassingly wrong and sang the praises of incineration on every front. I did a full presentation debunking their methodology, and it's time that the city actually gets DPW to get the prices of landfills, to look at the credible science of the impacts of incineration versus landfilling, and get DPW to get the prices of the alternative, because they use that bias study as an excuse to not even follow through with the promise of finding out how much it costs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Now we'll hear from Prashana Ambri, the People's Justice Initiative. Oh, and I'm sorry, we've been joined by Ward 3 Councilmember Matt Fruman. And once we finish this panel, Councilmember, if you'd like to make an opening statement, you're welcome to do so.
Hi, thank you. I'm Prashana Embry, and I am a Ward 7 resident and founder of the People's Justice Institute, a community training program for residents along the socio-ecological framework. I work on educating DC residents through social media and beyond about a number of issues that impact and that we impact in our day-to-day living, including our housing, water supply, and where our waste goes. So recently, from working on our curriculum, I've come to learn that DC contracts to burn our trash at the trash incinerator that sits in a community of color in Lorton, Virginia, in Fairfax County, and that this is the largest industrial air polluter in the greater DC region, contributing to asthma and cancer. In fact, the worst asthma rates in DC are in the wards with the greatest number of Black residents, like Ward 5, where I have good friends living in Brentwood and Ivy City. And that breathing our trash only makes this worse for communities just like the neighborhoods I'm in, that I'm a part of, that I care about. Asthma attacks are a leading cause of missed school and work days. And this is ultimately environmental racism, both in Lorton and in the effects the pollution has on DC residents, because we're all connected and we're ultimately downwind. So I hope we will continue to expand our city's sustainable initiatives like our pilot compost program, which I've been participating in and has been amazing. And I hope we will spend the time to get to understand how incineration is actually far more harmful than even landfill, which is already a lot in itself. So we can keep moving into sustainable living, like expanding our composting program and recycling options throughout the city and supporting local agriculture. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate you participating today. Mr. Seldman, I wanted to come back to some of your testimony, and actually, hold on, pause for 1 second. Councilmember Fruman, did you want to make an opening statement before we go to questions?
Thank you very much, Councilmember Nadeau. I do not. I don't serve on this committee, but I'm very interested in these issues. So I thought I would listen in between other meetings that I have to the extent that I'm able to today. But thank you very much to all of the witnesses, and thank you to you for your leadership on these issues.
Thank you very much for your participation today. Mr. Seldman, you said that single stream is actually costing the city more than a dual stream would. Can you explain more about why that is and sort of what the differences are?
Yes, a single stream collection of recyclables means that households put all of their recyclable materials in one container. It's collected in that form and brought to a processing center with all the materials mixed and crushed together. This adds a cost to capital equipment and operating costs. In the Mid-Atlantic, a rule of thumb based on interviews with processors reveals that processing dual stream costs about 1/3 less. For example, up in New Jersey, Bayshore Recycling is a recycling company that has two processing lines, one for single stream, one for dual stream. If you bring it in, if cities bring in single stream material, they pay about $80 a ton. If they bring in dual stream material, meaning keeping paper separate, you collect paper separately from the mix of the other materials. It could all be done in one truck, but the materials have to be kept separately. The cost of processing dual stream is $47 a ton. That's a $33 a ton difference. DC, I don't know the current numbers. It's between 25 and 30,000 tons a year that the city, DC recycles. That means, let's call it $25,000, 25,000 tons times $33, and you could see the extra costs that the city would have to pay if it continues a single stream. Dual stream collection and processing also benefits the city because the materials are cleaner, they get a better price on the market, and when the economy turns down and recyclables are not as easily marketed, dual stream materials always get marketed first because they are better quality. For all of these reasons, and because they get better quality and get a higher fee on the market, there's the share of a rebate system, which should be negotiated with any processor, means that the city will be getting more rebate money for its recyclables. The other major flaw in the current system, because it's single stream, is that the city is sending its materials about 30 miles out of town at a cost to the city of about $400,000 to $500,000 a year needlessly. That material can be processed in a refurbished Fort Benning Road or Fort Taunton facility that both have to be rebuilt in the next few years, or if there were, and there is, companies that can process the material within 1 to 2 miles of the district instead of sending it to Elkridge, Maryland, about 24 miles away, or Manassas, Virginia, about 30 miles away, where single stream processors have their facilities. All in all, between shipping and extra processing costs, the city is paying at least $1 million a year unnecessarily.
Can you explain how you do dual processing with one truck? Do you know the logistics of that?
Yes, it could be done with one truck, or it could be done with two separate trucks. Montgomery County has a dual stream system, and several cities have switched to single stream. It's either you give people households two different carts, one for paper, which is going to be the heaviest component because paper is heavy, whereas recyclables are not, because it's mostly air in bottles and cans. One truck, you can order trucks that can pick up these materials both at the same time. These trucks cost the same amount of money as traditional trucks that are being used. The city is now being used for collection. I also want to point out that under the Barry administration, when recycling was introduced to the city, we had a dual stream system. It worked very well. People may remember the entrepreneur Dickie Carter. He created a recycling company. He built a facility in Northwest DC up on North Capitol Street. It had about 20 to 25 employees. It was doing a very good job. The contamination rate was about 5%. Currently, our contamination rate is at 10%, and it has been very hard to maintain that. Single stream material encourages people to put items that are not recyclable in the recycling bin. Dual stream systems teach people much better behavior in their recycling. And I want to emphasize, we had the best system possible in the city. The jobs were in the city, the processing was in the city, which meant the value added. Every time you separate and bale material, you create value in the open market. All of this was eliminated when the city switched to single stream and started sending its single stream material far out of the city.
Why do you remember why the city made the change?
I don't, but I can tell you what happens across the country. The big waste companies, Waste Management Inc., Republic, they have enormous capabilities. They're monopolies. They control hauling, they control landfills, and they control many of the processing centers across the country. So my guess is that when the contract for recycling in the city came due, they, what is called in the industry, lowballed the contract, meaning they presented a price for which they would make little profit or no profit in order to get the contract, switch the city to their system, and lock the city into this long distance recycling of inefficient recycling. The processing facilities by these big waste companies are inefficient. They can't recycle glass. They recover the glass, but the glass is in such low quality. It's contaminated with the organics, it's contaminated with plastic and paper, that the material cannot be sold in the open market. It's being used by the company for landfill cover. Every day after you put garbage in a landfill, you have to cover it to avoid vermin and other contamination. So DC sends its glass, which is about 20% of all materials recycled in the city, to a processing center that doesn't recycle the glass, uses it for free, and DC pays a $25 per ton premium or surcharge for sending glass to the Elk Ridge facility. It doesn't make sense. We're paying $25 a ton to have our glass put in a landfill. I want to emphasize also that glass is a very, very valuable material. There's a company in North Carolina, Strategic Materials. They process glass for the abrasives industry, the bottle manufacturing industry, the glass insulation industry, and the construction industry. 100,000 tons a year of recycled glass supports 2,300 jobs in our region. For years now, DC's glass is going into landfills when it could be going down to North Carolina. In fact, under contract with the DPW about 6 or 7 years ago, I prepared a report based on interviews with companies, and glass companies were willing to set up a collection system and a drop-off system and haul that glass down to North Carolina. The net cost for the city would be $20 to $25 a ton. The company that I talked to was interested in renting space from the city, hiring either city workers or other residents in the city to operate the system. Right now, we're paying $144 a ton to get rid of our glass, which is not recycled. That's $25 plus $119 the normal tipping fee at the Elk Ridge facility. So instead of paying $144 a ton to not recycle glass, we could be paying $25 a ton to recycle glass and contributing to the region's industrial base.
So how do you do that? Because when you talk about the dual stream, you're talking about separating out the paper. How do you keep the glass intact in that model?
The key is to keep the paper from being contaminated. The paper is the largest single material component in the recycle stream. If you keep the paper separate, either by picking it up in a separate truck or picking up a separate container using the same truck. You keep the paper separate from the glass. The glass, there will be some crushing, but the dual stream facilities, such as you could go see them in Montgomery County, they just revitalized their dual stream system, their processing plant at I forget the name of the facility up in Montgomery County. You can see how it's done. The glass is recovered and recycled.
Field trip? Okay, we're gonna go do that. So, okay, that's helpful. So really, it sounds like at the end of the day, it's getting this glass, getting the paper out is the big thing. That's the big contaminant. And that once you do that, you can find ways to do everything else you need to do.
Yes, and again, I want to emphasize when we started this, when the city started recycling, we each household had 2 bins. The truck came by and put the paper in one compartment in the truck and the mixed materials in the other compartment of the truck. They were delivered to the facility on North Capitol Street, and the materials were separated, baled, and shipped to markets. Of course, glass cannot be baled, but it was crushed and sent to market.
Okay, so it still gets crushed. It's just not mixed in with other things, and that's what makes it reusable.
That is correct. You have to crush the glass in order to get a glass of, obviously is very heavy, and you have to crush it to get a better payload when you ship your containers of glass to market.
So
You-
it's not
you
that
do
those
the same-
containers are being reused, but the glass is being repurposed.
Yes, however, I want to support Susan Shore's testimony this morning by pointing out that a bottle bill in the district would reduce the amount of glass in the waste stream, and bottle bills, because the materials are collected separately, they get a premium price, and the data on bottle bills is very, very clear. Cities and states that have bottle bills have much better quality materials going to landfill. I also want to point out, and I learned from Susan, that the proposed DC bottle bill will have a minimum amount of product having to be sold in refillable containers, washable and refillable bottles. This is the ultimate zero waste system, and there is also going to be a national bottle bill proposed next year, and that national bottle bill, I don't know the exact numbers, but if the bill passes, 10%, if you want to sell your Coke or Pepsi or whatever in Washington, D.C., you would have to provide 10% of that product in refillable containers. And every few years, that percentage would be ratcheted up so that eventually the city and the country will have a zero waste beverage container system. And I want to point out that this is not rocket science. Anyone who's as old as I am remembers that this is the way things were done prior to 1960 or 1965, when the soda companies and beer companies unilaterally decided to end refillables because they wanted to penetrate the market. Right now, if we were to have a bottle bill, it would mean we would have to handle those bottles locally, meaning local jobs. And if we go to refillables, the city will once again have bottle washing facilities, which are job intensive. So all in
I
all,
was talking to a small grocer the other day about this, and he was saying that they have some programs they participate in through private companies too. Like, for example, some people do buy milk that's in glass, and they can buy the container and, reuse it.
yes,
And of course, there was that movement not so long ago for the beer being in growlers and things like that you could return. So it's out there, but it's almost like nowadays it's more like a boutique thing. It's like a fancy person thing.
yes, and it should be made mainstream as it was prior to 1960.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue to talk to Susan Shore for a couple minutes. Thank you, Neil. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
So Susan, Neil teed you up a little bit here. And obviously we're thinking, we're working on a bottle bill here in DC. You've talked about this in past hearings as sort of the number one thing we could do to divert waste from landfills and from the recycling stream. So talk more about how you think a bottle bill could help us achieve our zero waste goals, and sort of, have you crunched the numbers much? And let's talk about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And if I could just start by, supporting what Neil was just saying about dual stream recycling, and point out that a couple of things on that issue. One is that with the bottle bill, we expect that 70% of the glass that the district is currently recycling would be beverage containers. So that material should all be out of the recycling stream, which is also going to help a cleaner recycling stream with less contamination. So that's also something to keep in mind. And Neil's talking about the possibility you can use two different trucks, or you could use a truck that's set up for collection of separating paper and other materials. And I think that as DPW moves to electrify its fleet, that presents a very good opportunity to invest in those kind of dual stream trucks. I don't know personally, maybe Neil knows whether there are electric trucks on the market yet for dual stream recycling collection, but certainly that should be an opportunity moving forward. So we haven't crunched the numbers. We understand, and we're trying to confirm this number. We understand we had a conversation reported to us from the Container Recycling Institute, and I'm trying to confirm this firsthand, that 20% of the materials that are going into our recycling stream are beverage containers, whether that's plastic bottles, glass bottles, or aluminum cans. So we could get those out of recycling. And then with the bottle bill system, the other thing to keep in mind in terms of having clean and uncontaminated recyclables, most of them will go into reverse vending machines. And in the reverse vending machines, the different materials are sorted one from the other, so that when a hauler comes to collect those materials, they're going to be separate piles of glass, plastic, and aluminum cans, which is going to increase the value for those. But we haven't done calculations on the contribution of a bottle bill to the waste diversion goals. I will say that, while we are advocating for a bottle bill right now, and it will have an effect on our waste diversion goals, we can't do just one thing. We have to do a lot of other things. And I read through the testimony from DPW, and I thank them for that testimony. I look forward to hearing it. I was a little disappointed to not see something on how we could really up our numbers on compost collection. So I hope we can find out more about DPW's plans. I understand they're looking into what our colleagues in Arlington County are doing to provide another bin for yard waste and food scraps, so that all DPW residential customers could be composting all of that organic material. And I think that's something that would really move the needle, as would our efforts to get ourselves off of single-use plastic and move to more reusable and refillable bottles in the bottle bill program, as Neil talked about, but also things like starting with a requirement for our music and entertainment venues to serve beverages in reusable cups These are models that are taking place in other parts of the city, in Denver, Colorado, in Seattle, Washington, and other places. We know there are companies that provide those kinds of services, so it wouldn't be a heavy lift. And we could start introducing reusable foodware and significantly reduce the amount of single-use plastic that we're now sending to incinerators, and harming Black and Brown communities, as Prashona Ambry so eloquently talked about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ewald, you said that a former DPW director admitted several times that bids from landfills were cheaper than the bids from the incinerators. Did he give you any reason for going with an incinerator despite the costs?
Well, he was presenting in one case to city council. In another case, so we have it in writing from a FOIA, where he presented it in writing to the mayor's office. So he was not justifying this to me or other advocates. However, he made it pretty clear that having worked for Fairfax County in the past, that he thought that incineration is preferable, and that's why he was pushing so hard to build one in the district, because he thought that the district could make money off of having its own. And there was Sierra Club and us at Energy Justice and others that pushed back hard and took that option off of the table.
Got it. Okay, so we'll keep having that conversation. We talked about in a prior conversation about possibly sharing your research again with the new administration, so we can reopen that conversation as well. So I really appreciate your advocacy on that.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. And thank you, Ms. Ambry, for your testimony as well. Let me just check to see if Councilmember Fruman, oh, he has moved on. Okay. So that will conclude the testimony from our public witnesses. There's no one else in Zoom, right, that could possibly want to raise their hand to testify? Okay, just double checking. Okay. So thank you, everybody. We're going to turn now to our government witness from the Department of Public Works. Bring any guests you would like. We've got our Chief Administrative Officer, Jessica Smith. And anybody who's coming up, I'm going to swear you in. So just get settled and then we'll do that. We're going to do slides. I'm sure the tech will be with us on the slides. Going to give it our best shot. Okay. So could you each raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Public Works and Operations is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay. So are there slides for the testimony then? Yeah. Okay. We have them. Sarah's going to do them. Okay, great. Do you think they're going to show up in the Zoom? Oh, Sarah's in the Zoom. Okay. We're prepared for anything today here with all this tech in this room, so. So you're up. Yeah, there you go. That's the view you wanted. All right, you may begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Councilmember Nadeau and staff. Thank you for holding the Zero Waste Roundtable and allowing DPW to speak to our accomplishments to date and plans for the future. I am Jessica Smith, Chief Administrative Officer of the Department of Public Works, and the Office of Waste Diversion is under my purview. With me, I have John Johnson, the Program Manager for the Office of Waste Diversion, and Sarah Hoffman-Graham, a Program Analyst and Main Curator in the Zero Waste Plan. I want to start off by thanking Mayor Bowser for her strong commitment to ensuring the district is a leader in sustainability, supporting programs, practices, and policies that make our communities healthier for current and future residents. I also want to thank the hardworking staff at our Office of Waste Diversion. This small but mighty team has made tremendous headway over the last year in particular and has moved us closer to our zero waste goals. The future is truly green, and I'm excited to share more of our plans with you today. I have a deck to hit the highlights, and because I think it's easier to see pictures and data as we're talking, but I have submitted a full testimony for the record. The Sustainable Solid Waste Management Amendment Act of 2014 established an interagency working group tasked with the creation of the Zero Waste Plan, our roadmap for reaching our goal of diverting 80% of the district's waste away from landfills and incineration. This plan was carefully curated after much research and communication with leaders around the world, carefully conducted cost-benefit analyses, and robust public engagement. We're proud of the final product and excited to share with you today where we're at and where we're going. As you know, the Zero Waste Plan is made up of 7 overarching goals and 43 actions designed to meet these goals. There are 32 agencies responsible for actions in the Zero Waste Plan. DPW plays the biggest role in goal number 3, increase recycling and composting accessibility. Number 4, establish resilient zero waste operations and infrastructure. And number 6, increase education and enforcement. So these actions put together help us reach our goals, which have tremendous impact on our city, including diverting nearly 1 million tons of waste annually, avoiding an estimated 1.3 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions, and creating nearly 300 green jobs. The good news is we are already making progress towards our goal. You'll see that we went from 16% diversion rate in 2018 to a nearly 28% diversion rate in 2022, and that was before we started the curbside compost pilot, so we expect even bigger jump for this next year. That said, we know we have a ways to go, so let's start with what we have done to work towards increasing these numbers and meeting our goals. The DPW OWD team has been hard at work. This past fiscal year, we have launched our first curbside organic composting program, and with great success, I might add. We began the procurement for public food waste smart bins, which will transform residents' access to composting options. We launched a new team of outreach staff focused on educating multifamily and commercial buildings. We reestablished our recycling screening program at the Fort Totten Transfer Station, formed a strong partnership with the Housing Authority to help them establish better recycling practices in nearly 5,000 units, which will have a huge impact on recycling citywide. Conducted numerous outreach and educational events across the district. So, where are we headed next? Our most recent calculation shows that we're just under 30%, and we're looking to surpass that 30% diversion hurdle in fiscal year 25. As you know, reaching this goal involves more than just DPW, and we're excited to work with our partners to move the needle in all 7 areas. But let's talk specifically about what DPW plans to do. Over this next year, DPW will be focused specifically on food waste, recycling practices, moving construction of our zero waste campus forward, and increasing our data-driven decision-making practices. So for food waste, we're going to continue the curbside composting program, we're calling it now, or moving out of the pilot phase of that program. We are also going to be launching 30 smart bins across the district in all 8 wards. These smart bins almost look like book drops at libraries, and anyone will be able to access them 24/7. So you will be able to compost at any point in one of those 30 bins. We're continuing our farmers markets across the district. We're launching the commercial food waste ready training program and certification. That'll be for training people in back of house at large restaurants, campuses across the district. And we're working with DOEE to increase our food donation options. When it comes to recycling, we will continue our recycling outreach program. They've visited more than 860 buildings over the past several months. That was in even less than a full year because they came on mid fiscal year 24. They're going to increase outreach and education, particularly in wards 7 and 8. And again, working with DCHA to make sure that the residents in those buildings have access to recycling options, but also education on how to recycle right. I'm excited to share that our zero waste campus is coming along. We are in the final phase of abatement at the site and are working with DGS right now to bring on a demolition contractor and expect the demolition will start in the next few months. We also just completed a scope of work that we sent to DGS to bring on an architects and engineering firm. And this is a really exciting step in that process because that's when community engagement will ramp up, and we'll be hosting focus groups and community meetings across the district to figure out what exactly will be in this site. We really do want to transform this from just a transfer station to a state-of-the-art zero waste facility. It is only 6 acres, so we'll have to have conversations about what is the biggest bang for our buck to go at that site. And then also increasing our data-driven practices. We'll be doing a waste characterization study this year, improving our screening program to make sure that we're able to tell each load that comes in what contamination rate is for that load, and then also then go back and educate those haulers and figure out where specifically those loads are coming from to then be able to educate residents as well. We'll be releasing our diversion report, and for this specifically, we're going to be working with our smaller haulers to make sure that we're really collecting their information as well so that those numbers are as firm as possible, and starting to track reuse and donation data to make sure we're capturing that as a big piece of the puzzle. When we talk about all these plans, we do so with an overarching equity lens. During the zero waste formation process, the zero waste plan formation process, DC residents were asked, with respect to zero waste, what does equity mean to you and your community? And here you'll see on the screen the most commonly shared responses. DPW is committed to equity while working to achieve the district's zero waste goals. This upcoming fiscal year, DPW will be working towards access to food waste diversion opportunities for all district residents. The installation of smart food waste bins will be quadrupling the access points for food waste drop-off, and we'll be distributing them throughout all 8 wards. Additionally, as we expand residential food waste collection, DPW will be prioritizing those on the wait list that reside in designated low-income and disadvantaged communities. DPW will be working to support equitable recycling access by working with the Housing Authority to make sure all of our district residents are receiving recycling services and engaging the community about DC's recycling programs. I again want to note that DPW is not alone in this pursuit. We're thankful for our partner agencies' support as we move our goals forward. Listed on the screen are the agencies that are lead or partners on action items in the zero waste plan. You'll see there are a lot of them. Thank you for allowing us the time to highlight our work, and my team and I are here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. It's exciting to see everything the DPW is currently doing with respect to waste diversion. At the same time, it's also worrisome to see all the things that aren't being done or currently aren't in the works. So you noted in your testimony that the residential waste diversion rate increased from 25.24% in 2018 to 29.19% in 2022. Very glad to see the diversion rate trending upward. But by my calculation, that's only about 1% per year or so. So since we still need to increase the rate, it seems like another 50% in 15 years. How realistically do we get there at the rate we're going?
I think it's important to look and I don't know if we can put it back on the screen or not, but there's a graph that shows each goal and exactly how much we need to increase it by. So
Yeah.
it is a careful calculation. But I think it's important to note that we've really ramped up our efforts specifically over this last year.
Mhm.
And so I don't anticipate that we're going to grow by the same percentage moving forward that we have in the past. So implementing the curbside composting pilot in and of itself is going to drastically increase our diversion rate. Going through the process with the screeners at Fort Totten and education is going to be a huge help. Again, we're trying to expand on some of the programs that have been successful while working with our partners, specifically the Department of Energy Environment, on their initiatives to drastically grow our diversion rates year over year,
Mhm.
and not just repeating the same rate that we've done in the past.
Makes sense. So the last numbers we have are from 2022. When do you think we'll be able to see the numbers? Like, what's the next update?
So we are currently right now working on the diversion report, and that should be out in the next few months.
Okay. And that'll incorporate all the new composting programs?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the original goal was 80% by 2032. We're now moving that to 2040. How can we be assured that the goalpost isn't going to move again?
I think it's going to take partnership on all levels to make sure that not only DPW is doing their part, but working across the district. As you can see, there's many agencies that are involved. And so making sure that we're all collaborating to move our prospective areas forward. I know Ms. Shore noted this, but it's not one effort, right? These goals were designed to be moved forward together to
Mhm.
really hit that goal. So we have to be hitting this from all angles to ensure we actually reach the goal.
When you've been out in community doing these listening sessions, do you feel like folks are excited about it, get it, want to be a part of it? Or are they like annoyed and don't want to have to do things differently?
I'll turn to John because he has been really hitting the pavement in terms of outreach. But what I'll say is we did increase our community engagement this year. We have a long way to go with engagement. I think it totally depends on where you're at and who you're talking to. I have friends that are still not recycling. Right. And so we have to make sure that we are educating people on what they can do and why, right? Because that's when I'm talking to my friends, that's what they're saying. Well, why does it matter? Why is it important? And so we have a lot of plans this year to increase our outreach. That's actually John's background coming from New York is working on the ground from all different angles to incentivize it, recycling, right? To make sure that we are communicating in a way that people understand by using examples and models. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, John, but I would say we're not there yet, but we have improved a lot, especially over this last year.
Yeah, I'd just like to add quickly, we had about close to 100 engagement activities throughout the last fiscal year, and about a quarter of those occurred east of the river in Ward 7 and 8. And one thing that, I did learn from just interacting with the public about these issues is that, one, they were excited about them. And learning about the fact that we had so many various programs and services available to them. And that was one of the things that really sort of, I guess, I was very happy to hear that, one, they were very interested in it, but also a bit concerned that most of them never heard
Didn't
about
know,
these
yeah.
opportunities that were available to them. So that's part of the effort that we're putting forth this year, is to make sure we enhance our education and outreach efforts and target particular areas where there's low participation rates. And that's one, starting with work at DCHA. As you know, there's currently there's no recycling program in place there, and we're working with DCHA now to see to it that every resident in the city of Washington has access to the facilities and services that they deserve. And that comes as a result of some help with funding from the recycling partnership to support that effort to sort of move that needle forward in terms of making sure that there's equity and access and public housing and beyond. And again, we did another round, a campaign regarding placing the smart bins, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little later. And we had community engagement sessions in each ward, just to get input from residents to make sure that they understood the program and had some input in locating those particular sites for the bins. So again, the community is very engaged, they're very happy and excited about the possibilities.
That's great. I love to hear it. Thank you so much. So I want to get into some of the specifics of the plan itself, and I'll ask some questions about some of the things you've talked about in your testimony by grouping them in the different goals outlined in the plan. And I'm going to be focusing on the short-term actions identified as the DPW responsibilities in the plan. For the public, short-term actions are ones the plan says will take place by 2028. So for goal 2, transition from single use towards reuse. Action 11 in the plan tasks DPW and DOE with, by 2025, adopting policies to phase out the import, stocking, distribution, and sale of certain single-use plastics commonly found to pollute district waterways and or contaminate district recycling streams. This is a big one for me. You know, spending time in our waterways and working to clean the bay and the Anacostia River, et cetera, and seeing all of these things that just end up in the water, end up in the, you know, in the neighborhoods. So what is the approach here?
Sarah, do you want to talk about our approach here?
Sure, I would, yeah. So first, I think we should, I think tout and be rather excited about the existing policies that we have in the district. I think we, to reduce our single-use plastics and single-use items, the district actually, I think, has some leading policies in this regard. And one of the things that will impact or improve our ability to reduce single-use items will be continuing to educate and enforce around our existing policies.
And you're talking about the bag tax, the polystyrene ban, the
Yes.
food utensils,
Yeah,
and the
reusables,
straws.
reusables upon request.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. The other thing I would say is that DOE and DPW, I think, are improving our partnership on this issue and are speaking more regularly about what this will look like going into the future. DPW and DOE recently sent, for example, staff on a study tour to look at waste reduction policies in Europe, including reusables in the context of Denmark and in Germany. And so I think there's some great movement, there are some good ideas flowing, and we look forward to partnering with our legislative staff in the executive agencies as well as council to shape some legislation going forward.
What did they learn in Europe that was of interest?
Yeah. So in Germany, for example, much of what you were speaking with the panelists about having reusable bottles as part of the regular economy and not as a boutique action, as you said, but just the container that your soda comes in the store. That's your option. That's what you buy. And so, for example, about 80% of all beer sold in Germany is sold in a reusable bottle. And so these types of systems, these circular economies are working and do exist in other places. And so I think there are some good learnings on maybe expanding our imagination a little bit, even on what that could look like in a grocery store in DC.
And how does that get, how do we make that type of change? Is it, you know, a law that says you must, as a a seller have this percentage? Is it something that we say to manufacturers? Is it something that we incent? I mean, how do you make something like that come about?
I would say yes and,
Mhm.
right? I think there are some policy levers to pull to require such things. I think there's also an infrastructure component. In order to reuse bottles, you have to have, and other containers, you have to have the ability to collect and sanitize them. And so, so I think in the design charrettes that Jessica has spoken about regarding the Benning Road transfer facility we design into a zero waste campus, those are some of the things that I think we'll have to talk about, whether there's room for this in a district facility, or if this is something that should be a more regional infrastructure approach, and kind of what the opportunities are there.
What other policies did the group learn about or are being considered
Mhm.
for this goal?
Sure. I could speak a little bit more about the types of things that we saw in Germany. I will say, and Denmark. I do think that shaping those things into policies. The trip was just last week, so we're in early conversations about this. I think, and look forward to continuing the conversation to see what opportunities we're seeing it working in other places. Could work in the district.
So this goal is supposed to be next year. So I'm just trying to get to the meat of maybe any other policies that you've all been discussing or ideas that you have, because we don't have a lot of time left on that one.
Yeah. I think something that we've seen already starting to take place in the district kind of naturally, which might be something that we could further with either policies to require or incentivize, would be reusable containers in like closed systems, such as venues. And so the district already has venues that are starting to do this, so we see that it's working. And I think I feel very excited and proud that the industry is moving in that direction already. And so I think one of the conversations we're having is what could be a next step there? What is the role of government to require or incentivize?
Great, that's very helpful. And what about college campuses? Do we know how much they're already doing reusables? We don't.
In terms of an actual percentage, I can't give you an actual
Yeah.
percentage. I think that the college campuses in DC, several of them are kind of on the leading edge of reusable and zero waste work, both in waste reduction and waste diversion. And I think a lot of credit goes to the organizers on the college campuses, certainly, and the student and staff leaders, and also to the Department of Energy and Environment, who have staff that work very closely with those staff and student organizations to advise them and help further their sustainability efforts.
That's great. And I assume we're also thinking about employers who have cafeterias like federal government, et cetera. Okay. Is that more of DOE's role there then?
I think as it is noted in the plan, I think this is a joint effort between DOE and DPW, insofar as we are sharing sharing kind of the development work. I think in terms of the implementation of such policies, I mean, we should keep discussing, obviously, in general, the partnership between our two agencies is that DOE works kind of upstream or up the waste hierarchy, and DPW, so I should clarify that on reuse, repair, and reduction programs. And then DPW works a little bit more, our role is to partner more downstream on recycling and composting programs to prevent items that have gone into the waste stream from ending up in landfill and incineration. And so I certainly think it's a partnership, but that's more or less how we split the work.
Makes sense. Now, we've talked a bit about contamination today and recycling, and beyond that, we know that even recyclable containers are often found in our waterways. one idea we've been talking about is a bottle bill. And has the agency given any thought to a bottle deposit?
We're certainly open to discussing that and just learning more about what implementation will look like so that we can plan operationally to be able to support something like that.
Yeah,
We're happy to have those discussions though.
okay. And then someone mentioned legislation. When do you anticipate that might be coming to council?
Bottle bill legislation?
Oh, no, on something else. It was Sarah, what,
Oh,
did you mention legislation about something else you were just brainstorming?
I think maybe about the waste reduction or single-use legislation.
Yes.
I don't have an exact timeline to report at the moment, but we
Okay.
can get back to you on that.
I'm not trying to get you in trouble here, but we are very interested in every aspect of this. Okay, and okay. All right, so let's go to goal 3. That's increase recycling and composting participation and accessibility. Okay, so we've talked about the big focus on food waste. I'm excited about the food waste smart bins that are be going all across the city. I'm very excited. One thing that is very interesting, I think, and positive about how this program evolved is originally I'd put money in the budget for something else and we tried and it didn't work. And you guys came back and said, but we could do this. And so I'm very impressed with the way that that evolved. So thank you for being a partner, a thought partner on how we're doing all of this. Because maybe this is even a better idea than the one I had. I don't know. So, okay, are the 30 locations set?
we have a list of 30 locations. We're just finalizing them with our partner agencies because most of them will be outside of a library, rec center, government building, et cetera. And so we're just in the final stages of confirming with those agencies. And the bins are actually in production right now. So we're doing that simultaneously. We're not waiting for the bins to actually arrive. Once the bins hit the district, they will be placed,
Okay.
which is November.
November.
Yep.
When will we get to know the locations?
There was a list of the potential locations, I think, in a report we sent you, but
Okay.
we will confirm that as soon as we confirm with all the partner agencies. I think we're just waiting to hear from one sign off from one agency.
Great.
Yep.
With respect to the online food waste diversion training and certification program, will commercial operators be required to do the training or is it an opt-in?
I'll look to my team here.
It's an opt-in program.
Okay. And what kinds of things are they gonna learn?
Various food waste diversion techniques.
Mhm.
Things like what to do with food as opposed to, throwing away. You can donate it. You can have it sort of for, things, how to best use it in other recipes.
Mhm.
Various, ways and techniques to sort of reduce food waste, as well as how to best, sort and separate it out from the rest of the food or the material that you manage in your kitchens. So it's a very interesting and innovative program. We're working on the videos right now. Hopefully that'll be up and out soon. And it's a great program. I think it will make a big difference in terms of really shedding light on this issue of food waste and how to best manage it.
Do you have a goal for how many folks get trained?
I don't have those numbers right now, but I believe as many as we possibly can.
Sure.
We do have one staff member in particular who will be following up on the ground with different venues so that we're not just sending a video and hoping people watch it.
Mhm.
We know people are busy, right? And
Yeah.
so being able to go in person and follow up, hey, did you get what we sent? Can we talk about some of the questions you might have? Kind of that one-on-one in-person interaction as well as the videos that are being sent out, I think will be helpful.
That makes sense. Do you have experience in your prior jurisdiction doing this? Is it something that people are into?
In my previous work, no, not so much so food waste diversion within the commercial sector, but more on the residential end. But from what I've gathered thus far, that we had some work with some establishments doing back of the house diversion. You have been working with AU, some of the larger chain stores, I believe Trader Joe's, the Wegmans, some of the universities and hospitals, larger hospitals. So we've been working with them, actually going and doing site visits and supporting their work to divert back of the house food waste.
That's great. So at a grocer, for example, it would be more like the donation part. And then in a cafeteria, you'd be talking about sort of all the things you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the hierarchy, what's
Yeah.
the best and highest use? I mean, donate first. Obviously, that would be the best route to go, but otherwise, you could look at composting
Sure.
as an option. So whatever the case is, we'll sort of tailor a program to suit the needs of the particular establishment.
Do we know much about who is composting privately, commercially? Do we have data on that at all?
I mean, the companies that are.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we have anecdotal information
Yeah.
on which grocery chains, for example, are composting. But that's one of the things that we want to work with them on in those follow-up visits. Even before we get to composting, right? There's so many things that they can do when they're cutting fruit, right? To sell in the containers, to not just throw those scraps away, but actually reuse them in other recipes to also sell, which, increases their profit margins. So trying to work with them further upstream
Mhm.
on, what can you reuse? What can you donate? If not, then what can you compost? And here's some options for you to be able to procure composting services.
Makes sense. Thank you. Okay, so expanding our curbside composting to all DPW serviced households is a critical step we need to take to reach our waste diversion goals. And in fact, providing curbside collection of recycling, composting, and refuse for all single-family residential households is one of the short-term actions outlined in the plan. I know that DPW is eager to do this if we can ensure the funding is there. Can you tell me your plan for expansion, and how would you ideally go about providing compost services to all DPW serviced households?
So for this next year, we'll still be servicing 9,000 households. However, we are taking a more proactive approach and looking at utilization numbers. So if a resident is not using the program over multiple weeks, I don't mean they just went on vacation or something, right? But they're not using it. We're following up with them to see if it's something they still want to participate in. If not, we do have a wait list, and we're pulling people from that wait list to ensure that all 9,000 slots are being utilized at all times. We are working through plans to be able to expand to all DPW serviced households in a scale up approach, to be able to, over multiple years, connect with every DPW serviced household. And then, as Ms. Shore mentioned, we're also talking to other jurisdictions and what their practices are, and looking at different models of bringing the services in-house, combining with yard waste and things of that nature. So those are things that we're exploring as well.
That's an interesting point. Something that's come up recently is the combining with yard waste. And from what I recall, yard waste is a different contractor than leaf, where we send is that still the case?
I am not sure. I would have to check on that. I don't know.
I think
Either
it's
of
two
you know.
different
Yeah,
contracts,
I'd have to
which I
double
never
check.
quite understood, except for that maybe it's just like the volume and the timing
Yeah,
have to be
I'll
separate.
circle back with you on that.
Yeah, but it'd be interesting, the more that you're thinking about combining, streamlining, et cetera, what economies are there? Obviously, LEAF is one of the most intense and robust programs that we have. And so it maybe needs to continue standing alone so that we get it right. But it's interesting to think about how all these things kind of go together.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
what kind of funding would it take to actually expand the curbside program everywhere to all of our customers?
I'll look to Sarah for her estimate as she crunches these numbers regularly.
Sure. So, over a full expansion, well, I should say one of the things that, impacts the cost is whether this would become an in-house service within DPW or whether this would be, continue to be a contracted service through, a private contractor. When we have crunched the numbers for bringing the service in-house, we are looking at somewhere around $50 million over the full course of the expansion to all 105,000 DPW service households. And that number feels a little high, maybe, because it includes a fair amount of capital investment for trucks,
Trucks,
for
yeah.
bins, for I also want to throw out educational materials, right? We'll be needing to do a lot of education to help the entire city adopt a new behavior, essentially, right? And then after kind of the big capital investments, as we scale up over a number of years, the operational costs come down and look a lot more similar to what it costs the city to operate recycling collection, for example. And so there's sort of a big investment followed by ongoing operational costs.
And have you thought about whether or not having the goal be servicing all households is the right goal, or if we think the combination of things we're doing, but more of it is the right way to go?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking at right now. I'm very excited about the smart bins, perhaps the most excited about the smart bins because
I've been picking up on that over time.
It's really cost effective, right? And it allows me the flexibility as a resident, right, to drop off my compost whenever. It's nothing against the farmers markets. We love them, but you got to be available on a certain day at a certain time. And so that's exactly what we're looking at is how much does it cost to operate the smart bin? We'll look at utilization rates. Of course, you scan to open the bin. So we'll be able to see how many people are actually using the bins and hope to expand those if it works as well as we think it's going to. And so those are the things that we're weighing right now. Is it a every household? Is it an expanding the bin option?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, in the bins, we think will serve mostly people who are in multifamily, can't access a curbside program. That's a huge thing for us in Ward 1 because we're so dense, so many multifamily households. So maybe maybe with the expansion to more curbside, you'd still need the smart bins to reach our goals. But I will be interested to follow that. And if there is a lot of adoption with the smart bins, that actually could, and I'd love to hear from people like how they utilize it. Is it like, we're going to bring out tonight's scraps every night?
Right.
Or is it like, we're going to keep a bunch under the sink and then empty the bag? And the reason I'm thinking about that is that the pilot we didn't get to do, which was the waste containers for a block where you can bring your bag out anytime and dump it in the bin instead of having the carts. It's the same sort of mentality. It's like at your convenience, dump your trash and not be responsible for whatever day the pickup is. So in some ways, the smart compost bins could help us with the public getting used to the idea of an anytime waste
Which I
management system.
appreciate as a pilot participant, right?
Yeah.
I am waiting the week to dump it. And sometimes my bin gets full.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, should I try to go to a farmer's market on Saturday and empty it? Right. So I like the flexibility of being able to do it whenever you want.
Yeah.
And I think it'll depend on how close the bins are to each person, right? On if I'm going. But that was also the thought in partnering with sites that people frequent. Because if I'm going to go to the library anyway, or the rec center anyway, or the Reeves Center anyway, right?
I'll just take my compost when I go return my book.
Exactly.
Or when I go to the gym or
yeah,
that makes sense. It's definitely more thinking through like an urban walkable lifestyle, or even a drivable one, like you're going somewhere, you can get all your errands in.
Yep.
Okay. If it became an in-house program, would we need to legislate that, or is that something DPW has the authority to do?
For the
I'm sorry, for
curbside
the curbside,
composting.
yeah.
We would have the ability to do that, right? Yeah, we wouldn't need legislation for that.
Okay. So the plan also tasks DPW and DOB with adopting a universal recycling and composting ordinance requiring the source separation and collection of recyclables and compostables within all commercial, institutional, governmental, and multifamily residential buildings by 2025. Is this currently underway?
Yes.
Okay. And how is DPW working with Department of Buildings to make that happen?
So the mandatory source separation of waste into 3 categories: trash, recycling, and organics material, is actually in all sectors, is already a requirement in DC code. But it is dependent upon a kind of a trigger, that the implementation of an organics requirement will not go into place until the Department of Public Works, or until the mayor through the Department of Public Works implements collection of residential organics. And so, so much of that legislation already exists. And we would be working through kind of the prerequisites.
And to get nitpicky about it, would that mean a permanent program, not a pilot program? Meaning the trigger.
Yeah, I would want to defer to a lawyer on that.
You didn't bring any lawyers with you?
Our lawyer is homesick. So.
Okay. Okay, yeah, let's talk more about that later because I would love to know what the trigger is because it's something we were thinking about. It's good to know it's already in code. So, and then also like, what does that mean? Every household having access.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know if you want to speak to it, Sarah, but this is a lot of her recycling outreach specialist work is, okay, you have it, and now are people using it? And then are people using it correctly,
Mhm.
right? And there, a lot of people want to have good intentions, but don't sort their materials correctly. And so that's what Sarah's new team has been hitting boots on the ground, focused on, is going to these buildings and talking about, one, do you have a plan? And if not, how do we get one? And then how are we using it and educating our residents?
Do you think buildings know that there is that sleeper clause about organics coming? No, no idea. I mean, I didn't know. So yeah, okay. That'll be exciting for everybody. So I know, I understand DPW is working with DOE to expand food donation options. Can you say anything more about that? No, is that fake news?
Yeah, I know we are working with a couple of agencies to
Okay.
really look at this issue. So yeah, we are working on this issue. You want?
What do you need? I mean, is it, I know we had this conversation with DC Health years ago about, like easing up on the expiration dates for food donation. What else do you think needs to happen to expand options? Is there anything holding us back in the law or regs?
So the district already has a Good Samaritan law in the books, which
Keeps
holds-
you,
yeah. Yeah.
You can donate food and not get sued for food poisoning.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a huge hurdle cleared. What I think will help institutions adopt more food donation practices is the technical assistance on how to do it,
Mm.
how to identify edible food from their food waste, and then also connect those entities with food donation recipients, such as nonprofits, food banks, or other kind of go-between organizations that
Mhm.
do the distribution of edible food to donor organizations. An example of that kind of assistance that happened this past year, as a a partnership across multiple agencies, was a training that was held for specifically hotels on how to donate their excess edible food. But we also recognize that we would like to do more than just kind of these one-off trainings, and that will involve some additional capacity. And so just over the past couple of months, DPW and DOEE submitted an application to USDA for funding to provide to expand the capacity for technical assistance for food donation within the district. We don't know if we'll get that grant,
Okay.
but we're looking for opportunities like that grant to be able to expand that.
Do we work with schools at all on this? K through 12?
Work with schools?
Yeah.
No, we're not
Okay.
currently working with any schools.
The reason I mention it is because at my kids' school, they have free breakfast for whoever wants it. They put it in like a hot bag outside the entrance and you can grab it. But I'm told that everything gets thrown away after arrival. Right, including the milk in cartons. So that, like, I've definitely seen parents who are familiar with that, like, I'm gonna take this home because I can't bear to see it go to waste, which is great, love that. But maybe that's an opportunity too. That's a charter school, but I don't know. DCPS is probably, I mean, they have a big contract, so that's easier, but okay. Moving to recycling, I'm very pleased to hear about the work of the new recycling outreach specialists and the impact they're having. You noted that DPW has seen a 55% increase in compliance among buildings with recycling compliance issues following technical assistance from the specialists. What sort of technical assistance is being provided?
I'm going to gladly turn it over to Sarah, but give her a shout out for fully standing up this team and really having them hit the ground running in terms of they've been out for only a few short months and have already gotten to 860 buildings. So we look for even more expansion in the next year over with that.
And I'll pass on my shout out to the recycling outreach specialists. So this is a new team of 6 people who started working through an assigned portfolio of multifamily properties in November, late November last year. And what they are doing is working with the property primarily to help the property understand what the requirements are, and then to do a walkthrough of the building with the property manager, building engineer, to help them identify if they are in compliance with those requirements. And so really what this is intended to be is kind of an education effort prior to enforcement efforts, right? We're trying to keep buildings apprised of what the requirements are so that they can meet them more effectively.
Thank you.
And then you do a follow-up visit, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So if a building is is doing great, is in compliance with the requirements, they get a big thumbs up and a congratulations. And if they're deficient in a requirement, the staff will let them know, notify them, give them information about what they need to do to address it, and then do a follow-up visit within a couple of weeks to see if they've actually addressed the issue. And also pointing them towards resources that the Office of Waste Diversion and DPW have to help people understand requirements. One of the most common issues that we're finding is a lack of signage in multifamily properties for identifying which is a trash and which is recycling bin, what can be put in your recycling bin, where the recycling bin is, that kind of thing. And so there's actually a suite of materials that DPW offers to these buildings. And so that's, such a simple fix that once it's pointed out, once that offer is made, the fix comes really fast. And so I think that's been great to see the changes that team has been able to make.
Does every hauler that works in the District of Columbia, every commercial hauler, allow the same materials in recycling, or do any of them have different items that they accept?
Commercial haulers are required, or I should say, property owners are required to offer recycling collection for all of the materials designated on the mayor's list.
Okay, so we decide.
Yep.
Got it. So last council period, the committee that had oversight of DPW at the time held a hearing on Councilmember Louis George's Clean Collections Bill. Oh, hang on a second. Which would establish minimum solid waste capacity requirements at multifamily residential buildings. During the hearing, DPW staff noted that perhaps a bigger issue than lack of trash capacity is lack of recycling capacity. Do you still think that's true? Lack of recycling capacity at multifam?
I do think that is an issue that we see in multifamily properties, both spatial capacity, but also it's more common in these properties that residents will need to can bring their trash to a trash room on their floor, but they need to bring their recycling down to a loading dock, for example. And so even if there's space, there's maybe a differential in access or ease of access to recycling services. So I do think that that is one of the barriers that multifamily residents face in accessing recycling.
Oh, man, you would think people would want it the other way around since the recycling smells less bad, but maybe someday. Okay, any other issues? Okay, you've kind of covered that. Let's see. I also just want to say how excited I am to hear about DPW's plans to track the performance data of the city's recycling program to identify when and where the most contamination is coming from and use that data to inform the agency's education and targeting outreach. So that's great. I'm also very glad to hear about the FY25 relaunch of recycling services at the Housing Authority. So has that contract been awarded yet or signed?
That contract is going to go before the DCHA's review board, I believe October 9th.
Okay.
And there should be a decision made at that point to contract with a hauler. And the assumption is that recycling service is going to start sometimes mid-November.
And you said 5,000 households, is that right?
Well, technically there's 6,700 households
Yeah.
at DCHA.
Yeah.
But I think those that have folks living in them, I say inhabitable, I guess we can say that at this point,
Yeah.
about close to 4,700.
Okay. And in terms of improving waste diversion within the district government, what's the agency planning here beyond relaunching recycling at Housing Authority properties? So for our own properties and agencies.
In terms of just day-to-day diversion or,
You meant recycling? We meant recycling.
okay.
Yes, so improving recycling at government buildings.
So this is something, I showed the slide with all of our partner agencies, and this one really does rely on
DGF.
close collaboration with our partners, right?
Yeah.
And so making sure that we at DPW at our various buildings and across the district government are working together towards a plan to increase our practices. Something that the team is very passionate about for sure, making sure we're leading by example here.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, once you start utilizing a program that you have at home and then you come to work and it's not there, it's like there's a whole thing,
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
now we're composting. So, I can take my food scraps home in my lunchbox. That's fine, whatever. But it's also sort of reflexively, where do I drop it? Where's the bin? And that's a good thing. So hoping that's something that we'll strive for. I know we own this building, so that's on us, but definitely something that I hope we'll strive for at our government agencies. It's a really powerful thing to have that captive audience of tens of thousands of employees, so many of whom live in the district, to sort of just, get that burned into their brains and their habits. And, I love that opportunity for us.
Absolutely.
As I mentioned earlier, this past July, the executive withdrew its proposed contract for processing of DC's recyclables from the council consideration because of issues with the contracting process. The new RFP is expected to be released soon. I understand there were some changes in the scope of work. Can you talk about what those changes are and why they were made?
Certainly. So our recycling contract expired in August of 2020, and DPW has been working on, with our partners at OCP on a new solicitation. Obviously, some time had passed and we really wanted to make sure that it was fitting the agency's needs. And so we are working closely with OCP to issue a new contract very soon. And I would say one of the biggest distinctions is that new contract will include the hauling piece as well. So that's really the biggest.
Yeah. And that was a thing we
change.
had really dialed in on too. So thank you for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. So that's the biggest change for what you'll see in the new contract that'll go out.
Why is that important?
So a couple of reasons. One, as an oversight, us as an oversight, right, being able to at the transfer station understand who is responsible, who is our main point of contact, how are we holding them accountable? I think that is big, that we have one entity there that we're really watching over. But also as a cost saving metric as well. Included in that is also making sure that if a site that the contractor is taking our materials to is at capacity for whatever reason, that they have to include a diversion site and handle that on their own so that they can actually go to another site if site A is at capacity and DPW isn't responsible for eating that cost and that hauling piece.
Oh, how often does that happen?
I would say not super frequently. It did happen recently that one of our sites was at capacity. Again, we were able to divert to another site, but it's really important that we don't keep materials on the floor for numerous reasons. First and foremost, as a fire hazard.
Fire, yeah. Thank you. We heard from Neil Seldman today that dual stream recycling may actually be both cheaper and more effective than single stream recycling. Is this something DPW has looked into at all or plans to look into?
It is something we're looking into. It's important to note though, and I don't disagree with his comments. One of the things that we're always thinking is one, we would have to get a new fleet, right? And that's not cheap. So when that was happening before, DPW was contracting for recycling services. So we have never had trucks that can handle
Two compartments or whatever.
Exactly. Again, not opposed to that, but that's not cheap, right? And so
Right.
it's something we'd have to look into. Additionally, it's the education piece as well. So you can have all the policies in the world, but we need to make sure that that's accompanied with strategic outreach to residents on what am I putting where, and making sure that if you're having multiple bins that they know how to actually use those. And so it's just making sure that we get the timing right and have all of the pieces there to do something like that. But certainly something that we've explored.
This does sort of get me thinking too more about like the more complicated this gets, the more it has me thinking about, does it all have to be curbside? Right? Like, you know, just back to our conversation about the smart compost bins and the designated bins on a block that we're not, you know, that we may someday do. You know, maybe if we start making big changes, thinking about that, and is there a place a person can go to drop paper or glass or whatever it is that we want to separate out, and then everything else goes in a cart. It's just, I think it just has to be an ongoing conversation and thinking through. I mean, you guys are on the ground, so you know what the challenges are for people for it to sink in, like this is how we're doing a new thing now.
Right.
And I trust that very much, but it's something to think through all around.
And that is something we're looking at closely with the design of the new zero waste campus. As we've gone on tours of other locations, particularly the West Coast, you are seeing at a transfer station or a zero waste campus, right? There are bins where you can
Just
and some even separated out of like, this is paper and this is books, right? So to
Right.
that granular
Right.
level. So that's something, to your point, that we're looking at in our designs of our new facility. How can people drop off and we can separate in
Yeah.
that way as well?
And yet, I mean, neither of the facilities are particularly accessible except for by car too, and that becomes a challenge. I mean, I think not today, but I still do want to keep talking through, the different pop-up collection events and things like that. And I didn't send this to you yet, but we got feedback from someone who walked up to Carter Barron and kind of had a hard time. They were giving her a hard time for not driving.
Yeah.
And so that and just, some of the things that we now have extended producer responsibility for, like batteries, et cetera, it still feels like we're not quite there. Like it's not as easy as dropping any time like I want it to be. And we
Yeah.
have to keep working through those pieces.
Yeah, and that's something, to your point, we're really looking at closely on the household hazardous waste side of,
Yeah.
can we potentially find a site that we could keep open weekly, right? Instead of
Yeah.
having to have events, as you know, real estate is
Yep,
commodity
absolutely.
here, but something we're looking into to try to increase ease of dropping off
Yeah.
those items. John has been working closely with a nonprofit around the battery piece, so you'd be able to drop it off in hardware stores and certain
Yeah.
buildings and things like
I
that.
love
So-
that you can do a lot at Ace Hardware now.
Right,
And
right. So
you
just
know.
trying to make those things easier, because as we know, people may have the best of intentions, but if it's too difficult to do,
they just
we're
trash it.
decreasing our chances. of
Totally.
success.
We were working with a guy recently who had some old fluorescent bulbs that he needed to get rid of. And he ended up being able to do Carter Barron, which was great, but it was perfect timing. Like he contacted us that week and we were like, oh, good luck. Like, good news.
Yeah.
There's a drop-off event, because he had done tons of research and he was like, I thought it was here, but it's not. And now I can't take it there. And we were like, we can solve this one for you. But, he got lucky because of the timing, and he probably would have kept those, in the attic for a while until he could, responsibly dispose of them. But most people are just going to throw them in the bin.
Yeah.
Okay, I digress. We also heard from Susan Shore that the mayor's list of recyclables may contain items that are not in fact recyclable, so they may end up being incinerated instead. Does DPW have any plans to review and update the mayor's list of recyclables?
Yeah, so it was last updated in 2021, and so that is something we're looking into. We want to make sure we can get through the recycling contract so that we have a good understanding of where the materials are going and have conversations with those sites specifically on what they're accepting.
Yeah,
Again, with the education piece, we want to make sure we're not too narrow, because if you're in a building, your materials could be going to another facility. So want to make sure that it's open enough for everyone, and that the public education piece doesn't get too confusing of like, well, if you're in this type of building, you're doing this. If you're, in a DPW service household, you're doing something else. So want to make sure we get the public education piece right with that as well. But we will look at that list as a new contract is awarded.
so, okay, this goes back to what we were just talking about with Sarah. So the education materials you're doing in buildings right now are all based on that 2021 list. And that's what's required for commercial haulers and for our hauling.
Right.
Is there a chance that with the new contract, you think the list actually could be different between commercial haulers and our contract?
I'm not sure. Do you know?
So I think the kind of key player here is less about the haulers and more about the processing facilities.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so what technology exists in our region to process recyclables. And part of why this is a little complicated is because that's a constantly moving target.
Sure.
Right. So facilities continue to change their technology. New facilities are being built. There's a new one in Maryland that came online this year. And so when we say that a property manager is responsible for offering collection of all of the things on the mayor's list, that may mean from one hauler that they need to take it all. If that's within their private contract within the property manager and the hauler, or that maybe they need multiple haulers if their hauler isn't going to take one of those items. But in terms of what we put on the mayor's list, that's more related to that technology and processing capacity within the region.
Got it. What's the new facility in Maryland?
It's a new WM facility.
Okay, well, that helps some people. Okay. Thank you. Action 15 in the plan tasks DPW with adopting a ban on the disposal of all recyclable and compostable materials to landfill and incineration, which I'm happy to see. We've also heard calls for a complete ban on sending any district materials to incineration, and you heard the related testimony from Mikey Wall today. I understand it's been years since DPW has allowed landfills to bid on the district's trash hauling contracts or received any cost information from them whatsoever, and that a report that came out in favor of sending the district's waste to incineration may have been based on faulty research. Is the agency open to revisiting this issue and taking a harder look at whether we should in fact be sending our waste to landfills rather than incinerators?
Certainly. So we had we commissioned an independent study in 2021, which showed that incineration facility in Virginia at the time was the best option. To Sarah's point that she just made, the science changes, the environmental components change, and so we are happy to hear presentations or review research on best options for moving forward.
Okay, great. Does anyone remember when that contract is up again? I feel like last time it was up, it was real quick, and then we were like, I guess we got to approve it.
It's my understanding that it's 2026.
Okay, so we have some time to work through that. Actions 17 and 18 in the plan are about public space containers, including tasking DPW with developing and implementing an adequate number of standardized public space containers citywide, with a goal of replacing all non-compliant containers by 2030. As a big advocate for public litter cans, I'm excited for this one. Do you think that timing will be feasible?
I know this is something we have started to look into. I don't know if John or Sarah can speak to specific timing, but I know this is something we've started.
We do have kind of a scope of a study. We had a team of student researchers working on it this past year, and did some great work with almost like a fundamental question of what currently exists.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of a helpful. So I think this past year we worked to establish a baseline on public access. And then kind of the future plans then would be to say, if this is where we are, where should we be? And then compiling kind of best practices from across the country or maybe internationally about what helps people source separate correctly in public spaces. It's a specifically complicated place to recycle because you're working with a very broad swath of people, including in our city, a lot of commuters and tourists who maybe aren't receiving the same level of ongoing education that a resident might. And so that kind of research, unfortunately, kind of came off the workload this past year in favor of some other big projects that we've talked about. But it is within kind of the priorities for the coming years, certainly.
So it's an inventory essentially, and then some research about what other jurisdictions are doing.
Yes.
Is there an opportunity for some GIS mapping and tracking of the? Yeah.
100%.
Okay, because like, do you remember when we went through this period where the cans kept disappearing?
I was just gonna say, like, copy and paste our public litter can work, right? And so
Right.
we're now getting a handle on what public litter cans we have and
Yeah.
where they're at and who empties them and when they get empty, right? So this is something that we could do in this space as well.
Is there an opportunity for the public litter cans on government property to be incorporated into this? Or are we still just talking about street cans?
No, I think we could incorporate those.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, parks and et
Right,
cetera.
yeah.
Because it's confusing to the public who's in charge of what, and it really shouldn't matter. And then we had this bizarre conversation with DPW and DPR earlier this year where we found out that DPR just like had this list of parks they thought DPW had in its collection inventory and didn't, which was like 100.
Mhm.
So that was, yeah, clearly it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would love to be included in this opportunity is a real candid conversation about where they can go and where they can't go. Because in Ward 1, we've always been like, yeah, put them in all the areas, even the residential ones, because if you don't, then we're just gonna have litter everywhere because every residential block is a block away from a commercial corridor, right? So it's not a law, I think it's a policy that they don't go on residential blocks because of when the emptying happens. And
That's right.
I think that we need to keep that door open
Yeah,
just
understood.
for all of our goals here, keeping the waste out of the rivers, et cetera. Okay. Great. Action 22 calls for establishing publicly accessible glass and reuse drop-off locations across the city and establishing commercial glass bunkers at district-owned solid waste facilities to capture the full market value. This one's important because right now what's most likely happening, we got into this. We had a very lengthy conversation with Neil Seidman about this. They're not getting recycled. So glass can be recycled and reused indefinitely. That's why we love it so much. What's DPW planning for this goal?
This is something we're looking at in the zero waste campus.
Okay.
So that'll be a component. Again, when we kind of do those cost benefit analysis and what goes into the 6-acre site, which might sound like a lot, but is not a lot of space, right?
Goals here.
So this is on the list of things to try to fit in
Yeah.
and to figure out if that's where we want to put.
So
stuff.
one thing that I was actually kind of struck by when I was talking to Mr. Seldman earlier was like, I had it in my mind, like, we got to get glass out of the waste stream, because I went to one of the processing sites and I was like, this is just depressing, right? You're seeing like this pile of glass in the corner, everything else is being processed, going through the blower and the sorter and everything. But I guess I didn't realize the role that the paper plays. And I don't think that's one of the goals, is separating out the paper. I know we've had many conversations about it today, so it's definitely in the mix. But not being an expert on this, I'm curious, like, is the separating out the glass as urgent as separating out the paper if the glass can actually be processed with everything else if the paper's not there? So I wonder if that's just something to be thinking about when you're approaching that goal too.
Yeah.
Especially given the capacity you would need on site for it. And then also like everywhere else, because you can't just say, now everybody's got to bring their glass
Right,
to the
exactly,
vending, right? That's
exactly.
not going to work.
Right.
I'm sure you could probably do something at farmers markets, et cetera, but so that's what's happening in my head. I'm sure you guys are thinking through a lot of it too. Okay, goal 4, winding down. Establish zero waste operations and infrastructure. So we've talked a little bit about the plans for the zero waste campus coming to the modernized Benning Road transfer station. I want to return to that conversation. You mentioned in your testimony, researching best practices for sustainable materials management infrastructure in the country and internationally. You've spoken previously about the team taking trips to see for different sites. What have you all learned from your site visits and research so far about what goes into a zero waste campus and what we might need?
Space.
Okay.
I mean,
I'll legislate you some.
That's what struck me. I'll let them speak to it, but right, these things take space to
Mhm.
do, right? And we did tour various size lots, like we went to a place in Berkeley that was pretty small. And so we're able to see, what you can do if you're really efficient and map out every square foot, and then have some strong community partnerships that can come and assist. But there are so many different options for what can go into this site, all good options. And I think for us, it's just figuring out how we want to maximize our specific space, knowing what we know about DC and our residents and their practices and what they want in terms of convenience, to figure out what goes into our space and where we can partner with, maybe some community nonprofits and things like that in terms of reuse and resale and rewash stations that were mentioned, in glass bunkers, right? There's so many different options, and it's just figuring out what's going to be best for us here with the limited footprint that we have.
Is there anything that you got super excited about that you saw?
I get particularly excited personally about the potential of wash stations and something, just given again the DC context and all of the venues that we have that could maybe benefit from something like that. And so I think that's particularly exciting. And then in terms of the top tier of the hierarchy, right, reuse, I think we saw some really interesting partnerships where folks were taking out things that people had taken to the transfer station that were reusable and then being able to resell or donate those items, I think was great. And at some places they were doing that on site, and at some places they were taking them off site, which could be helpful for us because again, we had limited space. So we could maybe do something like that without it taking up some of our real estate. So for me, that was exciting. I don't know if there's other things you want to add. Great.
Okay. Action 29, tasks DPW with forming a work group made up of the district, Mid-Atlantic states, and federally recognized tribes to develop a unified approach to grow recycling, composting, and anaerobic digestion infrastructure within the region, as well as establishing uniform rules and requirements for solid waste collectors and solid waste facility operators. Has there been any movement on this action yet?
So this was funded and it's been partially implemented through our EPA and COG partnerships. Is that right, Sarah? Yeah. So we're working with our COG partners and our Region 3 partners at the EPA on standardizing this approach.
Fantastic. I don't have any other questions. Anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I really appreciate having this open dialogue. I will say this is the most passionate group of people I've ever worked with. This team is really excited to move these initiatives forward. It is a whole government approach and a whole community approach, I would say, because it really includes our partners and our residents, right? And so I'm excited about all the ways that we have to engage. And I think I've tasked the team with not getting overwhelmed with all of the measures because to your point, there are so many of them. And I think if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority, right? And so we're really looking at what is realistic to do in the next 1, 2, 3 years and how we can attack that to your point, to really increase those diversion rates. Because it'll take time, but I think I definitely think we have the team to do it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That concludes this roundtable. The record to submit testimony will be open until October 16th. You can submit that testimony using the hearing management system. And the time is now 11:30 a.m. and this roundtable is adjourned.